This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/Mapper Forward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, everybody. Today we are starting a new series with Nawar Adra from Eker and from Stitch Coffee in Sydney, Australia. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Lee. Welcome, everybody. Another episode, I guess.
Another episode. You are a regular here, and you are a regular because I have a lot of respect for your perspectives on the coffee industry. You are intersectional in the Sydney coffee industry. You have a co-roasting facility. You also have a cafe, and you have a coffee roasting brand. And through the pandemic, I have seen you do some really incredible things in the way that you've pivoted in order to keep up with the shifts in the way the coffee consumer is behaving in Australia. And I have consulting clients all over the world, and I'm seeing the necessity for shifting in the way that branding needs to adapt to a changing consumer behavior. And I really believe that what's happening right now in the coffee industry is transformative, and that perhaps there are business owners out there that can't afford consultants that really are struggling to figure out what they should be doing next. And so I thought, I'm going to call my brother Noir and I'm going to see if we can have a good old chat about branding, because I am yet to see a coffee brand out there that that impresses me as much as yours.
Thank you. I mean, there's heaps, but thanks.
There is, but when it comes to coffee branding, there are a lot of really great brands out there, but your brand impresses me for a bunch of reasons. But in particular, for anybody who hasn't seen the Stitch brand, Nawar has a bunch of little animals.
Characters.
Animals that have a lot of character.
Yeah.
And he does like stupid shit, like he has a fish and a bear sitting at a campfire. You know?
I was thinking the other day because we had this conversation, but anyway, let's. I'll as I'm progressing, I'll be chatting about stories.
So, what I'm hoping that we do with this series is that we talk about branding in general when it comes to coffee brands, like, things like how do you approach creating or adapting your coffee brand, how much you should be spending on branding in coffee, how do we adapt if we stay on brand, how do we adapt to all the changes that are happening in the supply chain and in consumer behavior. So and then we will just see where the conversation takes us. So Noah, remind everybody. Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll say 100%. I agree with you.
Yeah. Remind everybody what Stitch is about.
As who we are, and it's really funny because, every day as you are training yourself to become a better branding or a better company or whatever you want to call it, society or anything. I mean, we learned something new about who we really represent and what is actually our core values and what is the moments that we focus on or what should be, indulging in and what we should let go. It's amazing because branding doesn't happen overnight. It's a series of experiments, and it's a series of getting it wrong all the time until you started to shape it in the direction that you want to be part of it. It's very similar to musician. Like a lot of musicians when they first start, we all do covers, right? Like I played a little bit in a band when I was a lot younger, not young anymore, but those days will come back.
Easy, Tiger. I'm a lot older than you.
Well, you were in the music industry, and
I never did covers though.
You never did. Wow, you missed out.
I know.
We did a lot of covers.
now I'm focusing on covers because I have no time to write my own music. But yeah, I get it. You try a whole bunch of stuff, right?
It's funny. Yeah. 100%. Like you'll be covering until you kind of grow up a little bit, and then the beat that you really enjoy, or the riff, or the core essence of the brand or what it's trying to do, and who are the audience, who are your targets. Like at the beginning, you don't know any of those. Like you just super passionate, coffee driven human
Mm.
who just trying to buy the best possible coffee, put it in a bag with a sticker that says what it is, and just hand it over to someone else or to sell it to someone you love, whatever it is your beginning of the concept in your life. But as we are progressing, I think stitch coffee keep changing all the time. It's very
Mm.
hard to say. It started with an idea of, I don't believe just single origin only that we should be serving. The concept of blending kind of embedded in my head a lot more. I'm like, okay, well, blend could, save a lot. It could taste good. It could give a consumer what they're looking for. And at the same time, it's kind of a work of art, right? So, and Stitch idea was we're gonna bring different uh, origin together, tailor it to a way where everybody gonna enjoy it. Because I always think 80-20 in my head. I have this really, this ratio is very important, and if we can give 80% of the population something they enjoy, the 20% we can pick and choose what they need, because these are the picky ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where the single origin goes into this market. So but today Stitch is as we progress, as sustainability become very heavy part of it, as our consumer focus grow rather than focusing on wholesale and just supplying cafe. Now we decided maybe that's not the right direction. Well, it's not something that's gonna last forever either, because we can see there's a massive changes in the wholesale market and its own audience there, which we will talk about it
Yep.
down the track. But what I realized, and we did, I realized that Stitch Coffee is all about the moment where you enjoy the coffee. It's that moment I want to focus on. That first sip. This is where I want Stitch Coffee to be highlighted. Like I've seen it in front of me when I was at the Easter show, because
Mm.
at the Easter show you would not expect a good cup of coffee, right? Like millions of people, everybody hustling and bustling to get to places. But what I realized when we give them the cup of coffee, especially like Piccolo or something like that, the guy shared it with his wife. Is like he's very impressed with it that he called someone else to say, hey, try this. Like I was that moment, it's kind of highlighted something in my brain. Is like maybe Stitch Coffee need to focus on that moment, that making that specific moment a better place. But in a nutshell, we are evolving, we are changing what we are doing, to better. Like we're always looking into improvements and improvements in many ways.
How do you
um,
define better?
Better, yeah, it's a very, very good question, because better for me is different than better for a lot of other people, right? But I think better is the culture within. So what I'm trying to say is, better is when you see your people taking your brand better than you, then it's better.
Right.
Does,
So
does that make sense to you?
is it, if I understand it correctly, is it when your consumer sees so much value in what you're doing that become like
Um,
they become a
no,
part of it?
no, I'm looking more internally. So when
Oh,
our internal customer, or the staff in
yep.
particular, are taking the brand better than the founder, I think this is where you're doing a better job, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where
You know what I mean?
they become a part of the brand rather than just working for a business.
Yeah, and I think this is where the reflection, it goes down to the consumer, and the
Mm.
consumer will see you as a better brand,
Mm. You hear that again and again in
right?
cafes where when
Can
staff come in and they love being there because the staff make them feel so welcome. The staff really embrace being a part of the brand.
100%. And I think that's not the whole picture, obviously, right? But
Right.
that is a measurement of what we've done so far, and it's kind of giving you a direct feedback that when people start caring, it means you're kind of started ticking some values they believe in, and then things are going the right direction.
Mm.
Now that doesn't mean you're going to make $1 million or you're going to be rich, right? But it means that you're started to build a brand. You started to kind of have more people care about the thing that you created, and they're gonna take it to a level where with their help, or without them you couldn't get it, but with their help you're gonna get it.
I get it. And I wonder where, there's so many questions I want to ask you right now, but I wonder where, I wonder where it sits, that how important it is to make the coffee consumer feel when it comes to building a brand.
The coffee consumer, it's a very complex consumer. you know
Mm.
um it's very different to, and I'm just trying to find another industry where you kind of can have a black and white differentiation between, but then there's a lot of segmentation within
Oh,
any
yeah.
industry, right?
But I think that's what
So
makes it so difficult in our industry is not all coffee consumers are created equally, and not all coffee is the same thing.
yeah.
Again, we go back to, I believe coffee has a branding problem
Yeah.
because we call roasted coffee coffee, we call espresso coffee, we call batch brew coffee, we call cold brew coffee, we call capsules coffee. It's all coffee. Instant coffee is coffee.
Mm.
Coffee fundamentally has a branding problem, and then we go and try and create these extraordinary brands that are trying to set themselves aside from Nestle, which serves 3,000 cups every second.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
I
how
totally
do we
agree
do that?
with you. uh I think this is the reason why coffee has been the way it is, and
Mm.
I believe because, and the reason, just to add before I get to the point, another reason is why it's so cheap, coffee, is we never had a proper branding across the whole spectrum in the industry, right? So we only know how expensive it is today. It's because we started to spend the money that big guys are spending on publicity, marketing, you know,
Right.
uh, on social media. Like 5-10 years ago, any roaster can rock up with a bag of coffee with zero of that, and the margin was there. You didn't have to price it to the point where you need to price it to make that differentiation. And
Mm.
that's is where you can see, clothing brands, all the other brands, they are so expensive. It's not because the material, not just that, is that whole branding elements that comes behind it that push the price to a certain point. Now, in the coffee industry, we either make a bag for 10 years, or we make one thing that will last for 7 years. So we're not really, you know what I mean? We don't shift,
We
we don't
don't,
change a lot.
well, because it's
We,
so expensive too. Our margins are so thin that adapting to a constantly evolving brand means our MOQs, our minimum order quantities, are unattainable for a brand that wants to keep evolving and keep adapting. And so if a coffee roasting brand is going to get their own bags and their minimum order is 10,000, it could be a few years at least before they run through that.
100%. And I think this is where now the world has changed and demanding, more
Right.
fine-tuned brand, more, people
Absolutely.
want to start belonging to a space or to a value.
Yeah.
So we have started spending money on that. Now it's reflecting heavily on the price,
100%.
and this is where now the biggest struggle mode. So I think the more of us start focusing on this, I believe collectively the price will have to go up anyway,
Mm-hmm.
but the consumer will start to see values in those new brands, the brand that is coming up with a better packaging, cooler looking, you know,
Mm.
lifestyle focus rather than just one thing they are serving. You know what I mean? Like there will
Yeah.
be, a, yeah, there's this whole shift within the industry. It might take 5 years, it might take 2 years, and 10 years. I'm not sure. I'm not really doing a lot of reports on that, but I think now if you don't have a brand and you don't have the budget for it, it's going to be very hard to break through.
Why don't we, in the next episode, why don't we talk about how you approach creating a coffee brand?
Yeah.
Because I think that that's going to be something that a lot of people are going to sit there and say, what do you mean I need a budget for branding? Don't I need a budget for advertising? Why do I need a budget for branding? Can't I just go pay someone to do a logo? I'll buy standard colored bags and just stick a sticker on there. So I think people need to justify why they should do that and then how they should approach it. Why don't we talk about that in the next episode?
100%.
All right, awesome. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.